Well, did we think of an acronym last time, or did we say
I did.
we'll do that
I
next
did.
time? Okay,
Um, I thought about this last night. Mm, could be different from the one I thought about last night. I didn't write it down because I thought I'll remember it. I
that's
didn't.
fine. Yeah.
Um, the one that's coming to my head right now is scary, question mark, tears, period, the letter E, and I don't know, marriage. I don't remember it. I don't remember what I had yesterday. Thought I could get to the end of the sentence and figure it out, but I didn't. Oh no.
Yeah. The letter E. It's tricky in these, you know?
Yeah, it's the most common letter in the alphabet. You'd think it would be easier.
Hmm. But it's not.
Mm-mm.
Especially for this one, like I keep thinking of like exorcism, but then that like doesn't happen.
Yeah,
So it would not really be true.
and we've done eek already a couple
We
times.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least once. And by the time this is posted, this is going to be posted like immediately after Jurassic Park, which is the one that we use Eek. So that'd be too much, you know?
Way too close. Can't be doing
Yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
We got to spread it out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be for like Eleanor, even though they literally never call her that for the entire series.
Could.
Hmm.
That could be good. What did we do for the first one? Do you remember?
I don't at all.
Okay. I don't think it was Eleanor.
I don't think so.
Let's do it.
Scary, tears, Eleanor. I don't remember what you said.
Oh. Oh, I thought you just didn't like it. Marriage. And I don't like it.
Marriage. That's right.
I feel
Yeah,
like there's a better word.
I think it's good enough.
Good enough?
If you have anything to say immediately, I'm going to open the floor to you so that I can eat my quesadilla.
I don't have anything to say immediately.
Dang it.
I let me go through our text from yesterday whilst you eat.
Smart. I feel like we had a lot to say about it yesterday.
We did. I'm just gonna say some things out loud while you eat, and then when we like circle back around, we can pick an order for the things. Um, he can't read the witness marks. Stupid. Hugh never had a special room. He can't open the red door. It never opened for him even once. Okay, here's what happened. I said a few of the kids roll in wheelie suitcases, and suitcases with wheels hadn't been invented until the 90s. And I thought the show had been set in the 80s. It wasn't. Apparently, it was set in the 90s. That's that doesn't seem right, does it?
Yeah, because that was 30 years ago.
No. Don't it's not 2020, okay? I'm not going to accept it. 30 years ago was not 1990.
Sorry.
No.
It was. And that's
No.
why, because it's only been like 16 years. It's 26 years, by the way, not 16. Since they left the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, or something like that. Something like that, meaning 26.
The end of Liv's episode when they're going up the stairs and she said, "You go on without me," and he says, "How could we?"
And it's like, Hugh, why would you say that?
How could we? I hate
You're
this.
about to find out. Like, ooh, shouldn't have said that.
2 months from now.
Hmm.
I was thinking about
Oh,
that one
hi.
with this like uh, along the last episode, the idea that fate is inevitable. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy you see all the time in Greek mythology. The more you try to avoid a certain path, the more you end up causing it. The mom was trying so
Mhm.
hard to avoid the pain and suffering that her children would be trapped in, only to cement that they most certainly would go through that
Yeah.
grief and pain and confusion.
And it's all, yeah, like you can understand the concern of like her being a young mom of young kids, right? And there is that kind of that struggle of like knowing that someday they will have to grow up, and growing up is so hard and there's so much grief in life. But then yeah, comparing that with like it only made it worse, right? Because now they're between the ages of 6 and 12. Steve is probably like 14 or something, but still, they're young. And their mom died, and they don't know why. You know, so it's like immediately, even if it was just that, that's already like so much worse. So
Yeah,
of course the rest of their life is going to be more difficult because they don't know how to process this like huge grief that they've just experienced that was like arguably her fault, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's so, it makes everything so much sadder because every time you watch the show over again, it's the same sense you get when you like every time I listen to Hades Town. I've told you about this like particular line, but like every time we start to sing, you know, oh no, how does it go? It's, it always ends the same, but we still start to sing it again anyway. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know it's going to end exactly the same, but you watch it again in the hopes that maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe they'll figure it out, but it's inevitable.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. Every step you take to avoid it just ensures that's where you're going to end up every time.
One of the points that I wanted to talk about that you mentioned was like that shot where Clara Dudley has the like angel wings behind her.
Mrs. Dudley and the Angel Wings.
It's so she is so fascinating because she always like you can tell she's trying to tell Liv to leave the house, but everything she says ends up the completely opposite advice.
Yeah, yeah,
She's like, if you're worried, you need to look out for your kids no matter what other people tell you. And what
yeah,
she means is like, get out. But what she says to Liv in her mind is like, I need to keep them here forever and I need to freeze them in time while they're still young and perfect. And I need them to wake up from this awful dream. So she's like, I'll feed them rat poison.
yeah,
So it's like, you know, that the Dudleys really have good intentions, but they just, no matter what, they always end up saying just the wrong thing, like just wrong enough that you know it's not going to work.
yeah, yeah. It's exactly the same thing with Hugh and Mr. Dudley too. It's like he's like, if your missus is untethered, like he tells this whole story about like Claire and their first child and
Mm-hmm.
all these things, and he's like, maybe she should get out of here. And it's like, great, not fast enough and not enough information. They plan for her to leave, but it's already too late at that point. She's made up her mind. She's too far gone, you know?
Yeah. And that's so like, it's so sad. Like, you can see where he's coming from, not wanting to, like, because this is his boss,
Yeah,
you
and
know? So he
Hugh
can't
gets
just, like, right out the
physical with
gate
them.
be like, um, you shouldn't be here, right? But he has to say, like, maybe it's not my place, but let me tell you a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they're trying, but they haven't really spoken to a lot of people who haven't been haunted. So I think they just don't really know how to address it head on, you know?
Yeah. Like, how there's like other people here? They're like, you mean our kids?
And they're like, yeah, but also like the other ones, you know, the tall one and the one with the mustache and the scary, 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 scary lady that's so creepy.
Maybe the kid in the wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually one in particular, to change subject a little bit. Is every time you hear like banging on the walls in the house and the pictures are like flying off the walls and they're like bouncing up and it's like boom 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 boom, and you think something in the house is it's going to attack them, it's dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
it's violent. And then you find out it's the kid in the wheelchair. He couldn't talk. The only way he could communicate was just banging on the walls. And his mom
Yeah.
was clinically insane and had no way to know how to help him, know how to communicate with him. It's just a kid trapped in his own body,
Yeah.
hanging on the walls to
And he
communicate.
doesn't know, yeah, he doesn't know what to do. And it just makes it so sad. Like that moment, the conversation between Poppy and Liv, where she's like, oh, I had the most terrible dreams too. And she's just telling like the actual event that happened to her kid.
Liv says, those dreams that feel more real than life. And that's exactly how the house feels. Like it makes complete sense until you start to think about it for too long. And that's also how Steve realizes he's in the red room. He's like, this nothing is making sense. He starts figuring it out. Yeah.
She's like, I had this horrible dream that my son, like his legs were paralyzed and that he was unable to communicate. And that's like really what happened. He probably had like polio or something.
Yeah.
But she was insane and she didn't know, right? And so then it's so interesting because you're like, they mentioned the kid in the wheelchair, like Liv sees a vision of him one time, and then you see him come out of the room one time,
Yeah.
and then there he is, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this poor kid, he had no chance because nobody knew how to help him, and everybody who lived in the house ended up dead.
Yeah.
Like there's no escape, and he can't even like call out for help because he's sick.
Yes.
It's so sad. And
They
then
both
it's like
have serious
all
mental
of,
illnesses as well.
yeah,
So
and all of Liv's like visions that she thinks are dreams, and then things that actually happens that she thinks are dreams. Like she gets so confused with what those things are,
yeah.
and you can see the same thing happening again, where it's like, oh, I had this horrible dream that my son was paralyzed, and I had to wake him up,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to wake up, right? Whereas like that was just the reality of his life, and it could have gone a totally different way if there wasn't like there wasn't something wrong in Poppy's mind
Yeah.
that made her completely blind to like the actual help that was available.
The same thing with Liv too. She had a horrible dream the night of the storm that she lost her little.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't a dream, Liv. She was
That
gone.
happened.
You couldn't find her.
Yeah.
You were searching all over the house and you got lost.
Yeah, like that's what really happened. And then while
Yeah.
she was lost, she had other visions. So then it's like you can see why it's confusing to not
It,
know what's actual dream and what's reality.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that scene, dude, when Nellie comes back as a kid in the storm and she's like, I was right here.
I was screaming
Like I was
and
here the
yelling, no
whole
one, no
time and
one would
yeah, I
hear
was
me.
trying to get your attention and nobody could hear me. It's just so it's so heartbreaking and you know that that's what's happening at the funeral and like the night before they have the viewing and the wake and whatever, like you know that's what's happening. And then kind of
That's where they see it.
throughout the rest of the entire season, that's episode 6, and then throughout the rest of the entire season, anytime you see something that's like kind of weird or something that's like haunting the cranes, you're like, obviously that's Nellie trying to talk to them, but they can't understand it.
Yeah.
It's like you have to see it from like the outside perspective and put these pieces together, and they just can't do
Yeah. Because half of them are in
it.
deep denial about it and
Yeah,
want to believe what they're actually seeing. Like Steve and Shirley are talking about hallucinations. And if everyone just said, hey, I've been seeing stuff this week, then everyone else would be like, oh, bro, me too. What if these aren't hallucinations? I've been seeing
right.
people, my mother. Steve, it's so funny because he claims he's never seen ghosts, but he's seen the vision of his mother like periodically throughout his life following him. Granted, he could never prove that it was her, like the one scene in particular where he's at the fertility clinic and he's looking through the
Mm-hmm.
window. She's there, like with her hand pressed against the glass. And it's warped enough that you can't say definitively that's Liv.
Right. Like it could be anybody, but then when the camera moves and moves back and you see that there's nobody there at all, you're like, interesting, Steve.
Yeah.
Why is it that during this moment where you're in emotional distress because you're lying to your wife, you start to see visions of your past?
Hmm. Interesting. But if everyone had been
Interesting.
like upfront about it and said, I've seen like what looked like the ghost of mom or the ghost of Nellie,
Yeah. They could have just figured it out so much faster.
oh,
They could
so
have known what the problem was, but they just have such an issue with communication.
yeah, yeah,
They cannot do it. They refuse to do it. They'll change their own minds about what they saw, especially Steve and Shirley,
yeah.
because they're like, that can't be real. And then Theo like is pretty fairly open about how like, oh yeah, I see things all the time. And I can't touch certain people or certain objects without like feeling things very strongly.
Hmm.
Like everyone, it's not like hidden, they like kind of acknowledge it. But then she still is like, I know what I saw, but I can't tell anybody
Yeah,
because they're not going to listen to me, right? So even if there is like a desire to say what happened or what you saw, it's like it's still never going to work out because this family just cannot communicate with each other.
they're vile.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to Nellie too, like the first time you watch it, it's terrifying because every time you see her ghost in the background, or Luke sees her, or she's standing by her own casket and she pops out of the car between Cheryl and Theo, it's
Uh,
scary because it's just a ghost. But the more, like, once you finish the show and once you realize that's Nellie just desperately trying to get anyone to hear her and trying so hard to get her family to stop fighting and listen to each other. Like,
mhm.
Steve and Hugh got into that awful blowout fight at like the night before the funeral, and she tips her own casket over because she's like, she just, that's the only thing that she could do to get them to stop fighting.
Mhm.
And it's
The
hard.
only way to get their attention. And it's like
Yeah,
it's bringing them back to like what actually matters. Like of course they have these years of history
yeah,
of bitterness and whatever, but like they're at her viewing the night before her funeral. So like
yeah,
the least they could do is focus on their memories of her, right? And she's trying so desperately to like send a message like I'm still here.
yeah,
Like I'm still with you guys, right? And she just can't get it through even on the night that like should be the number one thing that they're all saying.
yeah. It's heartbreaking. That's ultimately, I think, what makes this show so like addicting is because the first time you watch it, and there are a couple good jump scares and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's scary, but more than that, it's just sad. It's just sad
Yeah.
about the this loss that just tears this family apart. The I don't know if I can say it, but like the worst member of the family to lose, the one who
Mm-hmm.
was so intent on keeping everybody together and just so filled with just pure love and determination and refusal to let anything get in between her and her siblings. You know, just over and over again, she tried her whole life, and over the last couple months of her life, it was only then that she like was breaking down, and all of that time that she had spent in her life just trying to build up those relationships and keep everybody happy and safe and together, they weren't really doing the same for her in the last
Yeah.
couple months. Nell's confetti speech, bad. And but even still though, I love the line from her to Steve at the end that she says, "It wouldn't have changed anything. I need you to know that." Like, just because the last couple months were hard and weren't where they were all at their best, she
Mm-hmm.
still would
She
have,
still remembers the entire rest of her life
yes, where they
where
were
they were
and
they were there for her.
dancing on her wedding night and Theo doing her make or Shirley doing her makeup, and all of these things that did matter. And I love that idea that the good will never be outweighed by the bad.
Mm-hmm. Even though like this family is pretty bad, they're really mean to each other at times. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like the important thing. Like when Shirley says, "I'm sorry I didn't answer your call," and Nell is like, "But you did like all the other times." Like think of every conversation that we have had.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like I love when she says, I think this is when she says to Steve that like forgiveness
Is
is
warm.
warm like a tear on a cheek, and then she says like every time it rains, that's me. That's my forgiveness for you.
Yeah.
Everybody go home. Are you kidding me?
No one's doing it like
Everybody clap.
right
It's not a
again.
dry
No one's doing
eye.
it for Victoria Pedretti. This was her first role. I didn't know this. This was
Hmm.
the first role she was ever cast in. Come on,
Yeah. And
that
she was
whole,
perfect for it. Yeah, she did amazing.
Yes, it was incredible. She the perfect amount of like a fragile strength.
Hmm.
She was great. She was
Yeah.
perfect. And her line to Theo as well, like Theo's so sorry their last words were in anger. That's what she says. And she said they weren't our last. Like kind of funny. She's like, we're
Hmm.
talking now, aren't we? And I like it was just that line more than any, I think, sticks out to me because it's just they weren't our last. You know, it's I don't know, something
Yeah.
about it's just so simple. It's profound and just you know, hope even in the loss.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's really good. And it's like to bring up that thing that you came up with that nobody else has ever mentioned, but it just really rings home the idea of Nell representing acceptance, right? She's like, I'm
Yeah,
not really gone forever. It's gonna be fine. You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Like you guys are gonna be okay.
And even while I'm gone, if you want to remember me, do what Hugh says later and be kind to each other. Like if you
Yeah.
want to remember me, then you remember me through your actions to each other. You know?
Hmm. Yeah,
And the fact
exactly.
that she pulled them individually out of each of their like hellscapes in the red room. And okay, I wanted to talk about a few things. I wanted to talk
Mm.
about I mean, each one of them is so individually tailored. It's so perfect for each sibling. It's insane. Luke's in particular struck me because he was the only one of the siblings to realize as it was happening, he's like, this isn't what really happened.
Yeah,
Joey, like,
it's immediate.
he's like, this isn't, I didn't find you. You never came back. And she has to like fix it before he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. But he was the only sibling to like notice beforehand that it was wrong. Um, and he's put the needle in his arm before he even realizes what happened, and I love that. I love that because that's probably how his addiction felt to him. He
Hmm.
in his head he's like, I'm not, no, that's bad for me. I'm clean. I've taken all these steps to fix myself, to help myself be better and healthier. And before he knows it, the needle's already back in his arm. Feels like
Hmm.
there's nothing he can do to stop it. I mean, I've never had a heroin addiction, but like there are times when my brain won't let me do the things that I want to do. Even like, you know what that is?
Good old laundry pile.
Good old laundry pile, baby. I've been moving it from the bed to the chair every night for the last 2 weeks. I gotta tell you something, and I need you not to judge me while I tell you this, okay? You know those merge games?
Uh-huh.
I downloaded one because I was like, whatever. I've got a weekend.
Hmm.
It's the most addicting thing I've ever had in my life. And the heart. I can't put it down.
Oh
I can't
no.
get myself to delete it either because I've made so much progress.
Oh no. Sunk cost fallacy
I
strikes
know.
again.
It got me. And it's not the merge one with the king. Honestly,
Obviously, because screw that
he
guy.
he can rot. I want
Like,
that no.
why are we trying to save this useless king?
Slash
He can't,
favorite.
why is he in these situations? Like, how is he walking into a room and then he's like, oh no, oops, there's lava in here? Skill
Yeah,
issue.
no
You've
can
done this
blame.
to yourself.
But where's your advisors?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they've sent him in there. Maybe it's like a worm tongue kind of a situation. Except he's actually a competent advisor and leader, and he's like, we gotta get this. We gotta get this like freaking dingling out of here.
Yeah.
And
Which
then
I can only assume that's what it is, because, like, why are you a king? It's 2023.
I hate him. Yeah. Anyway, so that's um tying that back into a heroin addiction.
It's a 1-to-1.
Me, my merge game.
Everything we've said is exactly equal, yeah, to the plight of a severe drug addict.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I
Um,
said it.
anyone apologize for it. The one thing I will have to say in defense of myself is I have not spent any real life money on it. I won't do that. I won't.
No,
And
that's
once it breaks,
ridiculous.
you're never coming back. You know,
No, it's like I'm not spending, I don't even spend real life money on things that I actually want.
heroin.
And listen, being upset with YouTube is exactly the same as having a heroin addiction. Back to you.
They're we so funny.
No, just lucky.
Blessed with good genes, I guess.
What can I say?
Anyway, yeah. So Luke's addiction has to be really frustrating for him. Um,
Yeah.
oh, in
And
Theo.
it's interesting too,
Oh, go ahead.
about his like vision where he's like, I'm not gonna use, I'm already 92 days clean. And she's like, you already did. And he looks down and sees it. It's the same to me as like Liv and Nell both are on the one side of the spiral staircase, and then they look at somebody and then they're on the other side. Right.
Yeah,
So it's like it might not even be them, you know?
yeah.
Like Luke is sitting there and he's like, he genuinely is like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done. And then he looks down and somebody else has already done it. And it's too late, right? The rope is already around his neck.
Nothing more to be done.
I will say, if he didn't come back to life in the final episode, I would personally burn down Mike Flanagan's house.
I
Like,
never
there's
want to
no
watch
way.
the show
That
again.
would be literally the greatest tragedy because you see him working so hard. And finally, the family is going to actually reconcile and have like a relatively happy ending.
And both of
I
the
would I would have lost it. I would be so mad.
no, that wouldn't have been okay.
Yeah.
And
So the
can I just,
greatest shot to me is at the end they do the montage, the Gregory Alan Isakov montage.
oh my gosh, and then the whole like final monologue. And then you got this stupid acoustic guitar song playing in the background. It's so devastating. I'm not kidding, I spent 40 out of the 50 minutes on that final episode, like openly weeping. It's just, oh, it's gut wrenching. It's so hard.
It's just it's so emotional and it's like sad, but it's not even all sad,
Yeah,
you know? Like
yeah,
there's a mixture in there that just makes it worse.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like how it's like that one tweet that talks about bittersweet endings being
Hmm.
infinitely more damaging than like just straight out sad ones.
And he has his little cake for his like 2 years sober.
He looks so
And even like
cute.
Lee is there and Trish is there. Like it's like
The family, at
not
least
only do they reconcile with their partners and their siblings enough that Trish and Lee are like so stoked to go to Luke's sobriety
sobriety
party.
party. How cute is
Imagine
that?
being friends with your siblings-in-law. Luke has never experienced that before.
No, he's never been friends with his siblings.
Yeah, they're so mean to him.
Yes. Not anymore though.
Yeah.
See, they've I mean, it looks like yeah, they've
Yeah, imagine not learning that lesson.
I bet. Oh my gosh.
Dude.
Devastating. I do like that, Steve, Shirley, Theo, they all were able to like reconcile with their spouses, their significant others, all these things. Luke didn't have to. It's not like he went and found
Mhm.
Joey and they have a good relationship. His biggest
Nope, she's
struggle,
gone.
she's gone. We don't know what happened to her. That's okay. He's just, you know, it's okay that his journey was centered only on himself. Like I
Yeah,
totally vibe with that. That's so he
I
didn't need
agree.
about anything else.
Yeah, that was the most important thing for him, and it's not just like kind of shoving somebody in because everybody has to have a romantic interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I feel like it would feel too like kind of a cop out.
yeah, yeah.
If you're like, yeah, oh, Luke is sober and he has a hot girlfriend, that's like good for him if that were true, but that doesn't have to be the case in order for me to be happy about him, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. We know if there's one thing Mikey Flanagan can't do, it's cheap shots. He
Mm-mm.
won't do them, I should say.
Not gonna do it. It's not gonna do it.
No, he's too good.
He has integrity.
Yeah. And actually, I was gonna say this as well. That's how you do like a character death is Nelly. You know,
Mm.
you don't just kill off Luke too for shock value. because that would have, sure, maybe that would have been a more devastating ending. You kill everyone who died.
But the point of it isn't to have a devastating ending. The point of it is that their entire lives are devastating, and this is finally they get a second chance.
Yeah, yes. I'm so sick of, I'm not even going to say any particular studio. We don't need to get into that conversation today, but
No, that's fine.
just, it's so frustrating to see directors and writers who don't understand that writing a story isn't just about shock value across the board. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you surprised me. Did you write a good narrative? Just
Right. Like, did you surprise me because it just doesn't make sense? Because if so, like that's kind of lame to like watch something and you're like surprised by it just because you're like, this doesn't add up. These characters shouldn't be in this situation. If it
yeah.
surprises me because it's like genuinely like something has happened in the narrative that's surprising, but that still pushes it along, or like even like with jump scares, like it's not excessive in this show, but there are like occasional times where they're like add a loud sound effect to whatever popping up so that you notice it.
Mm-hmm.
That's shocking, but it's not like I'm not like, oh my gosh, I don't care about this anymore.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just adding to like they are in danger.
yes. And it makes you feel more like invested in the story as well when
Yeah.
it's done tastefully, especially the scene where Nell pops up in the back seat. Like that's scary. But that's exactly how I don't know. It does feel like it's so well balanced that you have those long moments where the tension builds and builds and builds, and you see something happening, and there's nothing you can do but just sit there and
Yeah.
watch it happen. Like with Luke in the basement, or with Nell and the bent neck lady hovering over her. You just have to sit and marinate in that. And so you have these moments and you almost expect it to just be those moments, and then when you do have the jump scare, it's like genuinely scary because you don't see it coming. When a movie's just jump scares, you see it coming because that's
Hmm.
all they offer. But do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
By pulling back on the jump scares, you increase their value.
Facts. It's
Yes.
business 101.
Yeah, yeah. I okay, I just love the like red room scenes for the siblings. Every time
Hmm.
I watch it, it's just so fitting because we could talk about symbolism and themes and motifs for the whole thing, but then you have these like 10 minutes for each one where it's just all laid out on the table. Not for the sake of the
Hmm.
audience, but for the sake of the character. And that's a distinct difference. It's very
Right. Because
have
like you can figure it out. Like the first time I
yeah.
watched it, you at least know to some extent, like when you see like um Nell and Shirley at the door and the footsteps move, and then later on you see Theo inside and she thinks somebody's outside. Like you can put together that that's the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and you can understand like Shirley has they all have some sort of level of guilt for something that they can't let go of, that they didn't handle correctly, and now they don't know what to do. Like that from
Mm-hmm.
watching the show. But then yeah, like having Steve and Lee sit down and she's like, you don't know what's happening because you haven't written it yet. And nothing is real to you unless you get to be the narrator of what happens. And she absolutely rips him a new one.
Yeah. She said, I
That's
was a
important
side
for
character in
him
your
because
story.
that motivates him to go back to real life and actually try to fix his marriage and be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he needed that. And it's not like we wouldn't have understood that. We're like, yeah, this guy's kind of a dick. And his wife is mad at
He
him
done been
for
new.
good reason. They were married for years and he never once brought up the fact that he had had a vasectomy,
He didn't
and
even
he
have to
knows that it's
tell her.
wrong but he just wouldn't say. Like
No.
she, even at the point where they wanted to have kids so badly that she was going to a clinic, he couldn't have brought it up.
No.
That's
He
ridiculous. Like that he's a bad guy and he needs to have that conversation and that realization.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And he lies to her like indirectly as well, like that scene where Shirley is like confronting him about the book, and he says, I need to like start a life for me and my family. Like he doesn't
Hmm.
say it outright, but he's implying they're going to have kids.
Yeah.
that's a lie by omission, buddy. You're not telling her the truth. You don't intend to start a family by
Right.
having kids with
And I
Lee,
think it's
the
just
family
trying
that you
to
have at this
appease,
moment.
right, trying to appease Shirley and Lee at the same time.
Yeah.
They're saying like, "Oh, I'm using this money to start a family," and then Lee is like, "We're really trying," but like, come on,
Yeah.
he's
He
just
could have,
digging a
I mean,
bigger
even
hole for himself.
he could have even offered her the decency of like lying and just saying, "Hey, I got tested before. I'm infertile. I can't have kids biologically."
Hmm.
He couldn't even offer her that, which still would have been a lie,
Right. It
but
still would have been a lie,
it
but
would
he
have
at least
been
they
it
wouldn't
wouldn't
have
have been
had to
leading
go
her
through the
on.
whole process. Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then he can just say like, "I already know that I'm infertile. Have you ever thought about adoption?" Or like, "What do you feel about surrogacy?" Like, give another option instead of just going so far down this path, knowing that like he's infertile on purpose.
And even still, he has this hypocrisy regarding his dad as well. Just the frustration that Hugh never told them anything about that
Hmm.
final night, about what happened to their mother, and then him saying out loud, "I thought I was being kind by not telling her," and not
Yeah.
making the connection. Steve, open your like, listen. Look at what your dad is telling you. How can you not connect these dots?
Right. Because his dad
That
literally says like, "I was doing everything to protect you."
hit you.
That's the
And
same thing. Like, I was trying to be kind, and I didn't need you to know this detail.
yeah, I
Whatever,
wanted
dude.
to protect the image of your mother by not telling you that she killed a child that night and
Hmm.
then killed herself because she went crazy. The house made her go crazy, got lost inside her
Hmm.
head, and she couldn't find her way out. Like, that's it must have been a heartbreaking burden to bear. And Steve couldn't even give him the decency of, couldn't offer just the simple compassion of, maybe there is more to this story than I understand. Maybe there is a
Hmm.
reason that you didn't. And he doesn't realize it until after it's too late and his dad is already dead and his brother is, being rushed to the hospital. All these things. Finally, he has this realization. I have been wrong about so many things. I'm so sorry, and I should have been better. And then he does. He gets the opportunity to be better, to be supportive for Luke, to be like understanding and apologetic to his wife and actually try and make amends and all these things. And that's the beauty of this story, is that these characters they're so blocked up for most of this story, but then finally you get the resolution of them taking lessons to heart and actually putting them to use and growing and
Hmm.
change, making the conscious decision to change, not just letting it happen. They have to make it different than it's been.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you're right. And it's nice that they like actually get that chance and it works. Like, I think
Yeah.
like in all the story of like, oh, it's a haunted house and the ghost and like the almost like time travel that they're haunting themselves and whatever, like the least realistic thing about it is that Lee freaking forgives him, you
Drop
know?
bestie. You
Like, are
deserve
you kidding
better.
me? How long were you married? And like,
He's awful. He's
yeah,
just
he's
a vile man.
he doesn't deserve her. I think he should have in real life in that situation. Chances are she wouldn't have forgiven him, and they would have found somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but it is nice to see like even they could make it work.
Yeah.
Like that's it again ties back to like the point of the story being like love and forgiveness and owning up to your own bullshit and trying again.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I like Theo as well, because she even starts to make this change beforehand, and I love that it goes in
Hmm.
reverse, like, order as well. Nell first, and then Luke. He makes the realization he's like gonna go destroy the house, and then Theo's realizing like things are not right. I'm not gonna let like anything bad happen to the rest of my siblings without me making an effort first. Theo refusing to shut down and push his sister away again, and then Steve is the last one to realize, and then he has to be the one to carry the burden of the house as well. And it's just good.
Mhm.
Good order. I freaking hate this show.
Yeah. And it kind of like, if hypothetically, if each person in some way represented a stage of grief, it makes sense that like the closest ones to acceptance would go first, you know? Like if you're in denial, you're a long way off from being able to change, right? Steve is like so incapable of changing because he like cannot see that what he's doing is wrong but could be fixed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He's very like black and white.
Yeah,
But then yeah, it kind of makes sense.
yeah. And Shirley, I I'm
Because
obsessed.
even like anger and depression are, you know, if the stages of grief really just went in order,
Yeah.
they're closer, right? And it's easier to get out of one of those things
Mm-hmm.
than to be lukewarm and just get stuck there.
Yeah. No chance of progress, but at least when
Hmm.
you're angry, you're feeling something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's fantastic, by the way. Everything about
Thea?
her. She's so frustrating. Shirley, she's
Surely. Yeah.
frustrating in the show. I mean, Steve is the worst. We can agree on this, but
Hmm.
Shirley to me is way more frustrating to watch as a viewer because like everybody has that interaction where you're like, just listen, and they won't even do that. Or you've been that person where like you're so angry, nothing
Hmm.
you say will make a difference anyway. You're not in a space to listen, so like there's no point. And it's fantastic because you're like, why are you so unwilling to just give them a chance? And it's not anger at them, it's directed at, like it's coming for herself, but she's got to direct it elsewhere because she's not ready to forgive herself yet and move past this thing that she can't let go. That was a horrible mistake. She cheated on her husband. It wasn't even a mistake, it was a conscious decision. She
Hmm.
intentionally cheated on her husband and has never been able to let herself or her family or her marriage move past that. And the second that Kevin has the appearance of being unfaithful, she is able to
Yeah.
finally take out all her anger at herself on him to give it somewhere
And
to
he didn't
go.
even do anything. He like
Uh,
is comforting his distraught sister-in-law.
yeah.
Like,
You can see that. You can see he's pushing her
yeah.
away, he's holding her away. It didn't
Yeah.
look,
He's like,
it
get
straight
a
up did
grip,
not look
you
like
know?
he's cheating.
Yeah.
No.
But I feel like she has to be quick to jump to that conclusion because it's easier for her than having to actually like sit and think about what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's not going to have the conversation.
He's going to be at the hotel. They can't have the conversation. He's going to be,
Hmm.
it's easier. Oh, what a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I find so fascinating though is that they have like the healthiest relationship of any of them.
They do.
Like Kevin's a great guy. Kevin's like the only normal person in their entire family and extended family.
He's wonderful.
You know, they all get together for the viewing and he's like getting everybody drinks and making sure they feel comfortable because that's like a normal thing to do.
Yeah, taking care of his wife, making sure
He's
like all
doing
gets
his
well.
best.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
good guy. He takes the kids
he's
trick
a
or
really
treat
good guy.
even after
Yeah.
it's awful. His marriage is apparently in shambles. His wife won't talk to him. His sister-in-law
Hmm.
died a horrible way, and the rest of their family is disintegrating right in front of his eyes. And he's like, let's go, kids." Like
Yeah.
he's not
Yeah,
willing to.
because he's not gonna ruin their Halloween.
No, he loves his kids. He's gonna do like he's a good dad. He's a good husband. He's a good man. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so frustrating is because you can see he's a good guy. You can see he
Yeah.
hasn't done anything wrong and
And
that
you
he's
know
trying
that
to do
Shirley's
it right.
overreacting.
Yes, and he's not even taking it out on her. You can see he's
Hmm.
frustrated, but he's not like reciprocating. That's
Yeah.
that's amazing. He's wonderful. And the fact that they are able to reconcile and move past that, like that's
Yeah.
amazing. He really is like, and I love the way that Shirley talks to him at the end after she's about to tell him too. She said,
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say.
"My dear friend, what? Like, I'm gonna cry thinking about it because what a way to talk about your spouse.
Yeah.
Like, that's she doesn't have any like overly gushy words. It's just my best friend. You've been there for me through everything. Please, I'm begging you, just be there for me through this. Hold my hand as I'm jump. Love me harder than you've ever had to love me over the next couple minutes." And I love that phrasing as well. Like, love is such an intentional thing. It's a choice that you make. I'm
Hmm.
asking you to choose to love me over the next couple minutes, even after I tell you about this horrible, awful thing that I've done. And please continue to make the choice to love me.
Yeah.
And he
And
does. He takes her hand, and as she tells him,
he
he
grabs
grabs
the
her
other
other
hand.
hand.
Yeah. The thing that stands out for me in that one is she says like, I have faith that we can get through this because it's us. It's you and me, right? So you see, like, even though we don't really we just see her as a kid and then we see her as a grown up with Kevin, and we don't really see their relationship as much as we see, like, Nell and Arthur. But you still can tell, like, just from that phrase alone, even if she didn't say everything else in the speech, which was awesome, just like, I really believe that we can make this work because it's us. And it's like, yeah, like they have outside of this had such a good relationship,
Yeah,
and they are like meant for each other. Like they are so similar, and he is such a good person and loves her so much
yeah. And
that she can sit down and have like the worst conversation of her life
mhm,
and trust that he will sit there and he will listen and he will hold her hand
yeah,
because
it's
it's us.
because
Like
it's
it's so simple. It's you and me.
how beautiful. And the things that the man from the bar says to her in her red room vision, and the same with Steve and everyone else, the things that they say are so unkind and horrible
Mm-hmm.
and awful and the worst aspects of themselves. And those fears aren't realized. They're faced with these hard truths about themselves, but even those truths are exaggerated. Like, she has to defend herself against her own subconscious, the guilt and anger that she feels. This man is telling her, like, she's like, I'm a good wife, I'm a good mother, I'm a good person. I only did this once. I never did it again. And the things that he's firing back at her that are really coming from her own worst fears, that's not really how that's not what happens eventually. It's but that's always the case, right? It's always the fear before the jump is way worse than the fall. And that's what kept her held back for all those years, is the fear of these things that Kevin would say to her, that I will find out and I'll hate you for it. And that's not, do you get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
The fear of what could possibly happen, worst case scenario, that's not what happens.
Right.
It's just the house
And it goes
amplifying all these things.
right. And it goes back to, like, for me, this idea that they're haunting themselves. Like for Nell, it's a very literal thing that when she's a child, she literally sees herself in the future and doesn't know. But then with like Stephen Shirley, like having these confrontations where there's like another person who played a role in their life that is saying these things to them, it's because it's their own like realization of like, maybe these are their deepest fears that aren't going to come true, but like Shirley really did that. Like she really did those things, and she has to like confront that and come to terms with that. Instead of
Yeah,
saying like I'm a good person, she has to say like I can be a good person, but I also can do something really bad.
yeah, and recover from it. That
Hmm.
mistake will not define me, will not define my relationship. But we
Right.
have
But you have to be like aware that like I'm capable of doing these bad things, and I did, but I'm also capable of, yeah, being a good person, and I don't have to be stuck in just one of those two places, and it's not black and white.
Yeah, there's something that Steve said that I love. Him and his dad are driving around looking for Luke, thinking that he's
Hmm.
gone back and relapsed. And um his dad says he's your brother and he's a good person. And Steve
And
says,
Steve says he's also an addict.
well, no, what he says is the two are not mutually exclusive. He's my brother,
Mm-hmm.
but he's a junkie, and doesn't even
Yeah.
hear what he just skipped over, that those also don't have to be mutually exclusive with he's a good person.
Right.
It's like he's saying he is my brother, but he's a bad person because he's a junkie. It's like
But he's a junkie. Yeah.
you're missing the witness marks again. Like, look at these things that are staring you in the face. They're not mutually exclusive. They never have been. It's
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's interesting that Steve has that kind of mentality that um Luke is somehow defined by the bad things that he's done, but Steve is not. How interesting. You know, he's like, yeah, I lied to my wife for many years, but
I was
I
just
was trying to protect
I
her.
thought I was being kind.
I was trying to be kind because I don't want my children to have to grow up haunted. How interesting. Your brother's growing up haunted, and somehow he's wrong for that. Like,
Just because you found a different coping mechanism. Drugs
yeah.
or writing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Um, Theo's room as well.
Hmm.
Fear and guilt are.
We're helping hands.
And speaking of hands, that's the only
Hmm.
one where Nellie doesn't reach out and touch them. She makes Theo reach out to her. She's standing at the side
Hmm.
of the bed, but she has her hand out and she's not reaching anymore. It's like she's saying, Theo, you have to like break
Hmm.
down your walls. You have to reach out. You have to make the connection. And Theo is fascinating as well because we see in her episode that the gloves are only meant to be temporary. They were only meant to be, this will be a short fix until you're a little older and we can talk about this more. But when her mom died, there was no way she was ever going to have that conversation. Her dad didn't really know what was going on, and Theo was
Right.
never able to actually confront, like, and learn how to control these things. And so she just shut them off until, it became so overwhelming for her, and everything just flooded through. And I love her moment of growth at the end where she like throws the gloves away and she makes that
Hmm.
decision where you see she's with Trish and they're happy and moving out, and that's wonderful. But the moment where she takes off the gloves, that's where she's saying, I'm finally ready to confront these things about myself, and I'm ready to
Hmm.
accept them and learn how to deal with them.
Yeah.
Just
Well, and to
shutting.
grow up
Yeah.
because she's stuck being 9 years old
Yeah.
because she never got to grow up with her mom, like having that conversation and learning how to better deal. She like
Yeah.
she missed out on that part of her childhood that would have been really important. So yeah, I think it's a good step to say like I'm not held back by my childhood anymore.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. um Changing subjects a little bit as well, I love, and this is one of the texts that I sent to you, but I love that it's, you think that the house itself is evil and that everything
Hmm.
in it is evil and is going to like destroy this family, when really, like, it's, maybe the house is its own entity, but everything about Poppy, so many of the people in it, it's Poppy that's manipulative and lying and tearing
Yeah.
Liv down as well. But the old woman on the bed, you see her scare Luke so badly, leaning into like the little horn. But
Yeah.
Liv is, on that last night when Liv is wandering around and Poppy's whispering in her ear, she says, "That one lies. You shouldn't believe her. She just causes trouble." And she said, "How can I help you?"
Hmm.
Like, she's so sweet and kind,
Yeah.
and
And it's not like she scared Luke on purpose to be mean. It's just that Luke wasn't expecting to see the face of a ghost,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like she was
It's
just
the same
there.
story. It's the same thing with the kid knocking on the walls.
Hmm.
He wasn't trying to be mean. It's just that that's the only way he could
He was
communicate.
trying to get help.
As a
Yeah.
ghost, that's, you get lost and time isn't fluid anymore. Like, time is, it's too mixed up,
Yeah.
and you don't have a physical body anymore. I imagine it's so much harder to control and like keep it like contain. It's not malevolent. Or after Abigail dies as well, and her little ghost, is standing in the doorway, and just a random woman shows up and takes her hand and is just so kind and warm, and we
Yeah.
don't know who this woman is. Like, she could
Yeah,
be
she's one that doesn't really like we see her, but we don't really get her story like Poppy and Hazel.
yeah, or
She's
even
just
the
kind of
boy.
there. But Abigail is so young and so trusting. Just
Yeah,
take her hand.
and like this woman, you see it in her eye. Like, she's a kind woman, and
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful moment of like, okay, like, she's gonna be okay. Abigail's gonna be okay. And then when her mom comes to find her later, the Dudleys are there, and they're holding her dead body and also holding the hand of the ghost of their little girl. First of all,
Hmm.
devastating. That's crushing.
Yeah.
I hate it. But also, it's this
Ugh,
element
poor
of,
Mr. Dudley, dude.
oh my gosh.
Like
Oh
he's had the saddest life in the world. But I like at the end, he talks about in his monologue hearing the baby cry.
right, yeah.
And then
And
nobody else really
no,
notices that. But then at the end, when Clara is about to die and he sets her on the ground and then looks up and sees her as her younger self holding their baby,
their baby.
it's something that's like everybody else didn't hear the baby cry because it wasn't meant for them.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
meant for Mr. Dudley. Like that was his baby.
yeah. Their first baby that never got to cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and um, oh gosh, I was gonna say something. No, I don't remember. Yeah, it's so bittersweet and warm and like hopeful. Oh, I remember. He says, I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that was the cry of my little girl, the one that she never got to
Hmm.
be. In the same way that Liv says, I don't know how I knew, but those were my kids. They were adults, but I knew that they were
Right.
mine.
The more I looked at them, the more I was sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, there's that feeling of being in a dream, right? Of, I don't know how I knew, but I just knew. I don't know how I knew, but somehow I knew that I was in the Walmart that was in my grandpa's basement. you know?
Right.
Like, it's this element of surrealism, but the horror is that it is real. Those were her kids. That was his baby's cry. And it's scary up until the point where he sees his wife hold their little baby.
Hmm.
It's, and then it's not sad anymore. It's okay. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, they get to be together again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, really, the whole point of the whole thing is that death and grief are scary until they're not anymore. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it sucks, but it's also gonna be fine. It's just gonna be different.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Hmm.
It's gonna be different. Nell's not gonna be there anymore. But now you're gonna see her in the rain, or
Yeah.
in the snow, or on a tear on your cheek. And
Yep.
that's what's so sad about Liv as well, is that when she's talking to Hugh and they're arguing, she's like, I'm not gonna let them leave. And he's pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally she says, I can't be alone again. And
Hmm.
you feel that sadness of, the 20 almost years hitting her, of, she's like, this has been wonderful and I've been able to walk around and I have the most wonderful dreams, but then the reality is that she's been alone. She doesn't have anybody but Poppy to keep her company.
Yeah.
How devastating that she's, and the sad thing is too, is that it's her fault to some extent, that she drove her family away. She drove them to be away, and that she wouldn't have been alone if they could have just left, if she had gone to if she had gone to Janet's, if they had taken the kids with them, all of these things, if, you know but that's not
Yeah.
what happened, and so she was alone. And that's another thing that makes the ending so comforting again, is that she's not alone, Nellie's not alone, Hugh finally gets to be with his true love again, and their dearest little girl, and all of these things. They're not alone anymore. They don't have to be. None of them has to be. That's grand. And
Yep.
also, sorry, did you have something?
No, go for
Okay.
it.
I I love that the ending is just the tiniest little bit ambiguous. How I choose to read it is that they did go on to change. They did go on to, grow and develop and reconcile with their families, and Luke is sober, all these things. But you see Liv, you know, Hugh goes to hug Liv and Nell, and Nell is closing her eyes. She's so happy. She's squeezing her dad, and Liv is just looking right at Steve. And
Hmm.
you get the sense this isn't over. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've
Because
seen
she
people
still has
point out
unfinished business. She needs the
so
rest of her kids there.
she's got four other kids wandering around those streets. Um, but I've seen people point out that actually no, I'm the only one who has noticed this one is that Luke's
Yeah,
cake.
no, because we're the only people who've watched this show.
Yeah.
It's an exclusive.
Mike, he sent it
Mike
direct.
added us to his Google Drive.
He's like, tell me, what do you guys think about this? Be honest.
Yeah.
But that Luke's sobriety cake is red, and I've seen
Mhm.
people theorize that they never made it out of the house, and that they only think they did. And if you want, you can choose to believe that. There's not enough to disprove it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not to say definitive. It's like, yeah, that's a red cake. Liv was looking at him. There's sure.
Hmm.
You could say, I like the idea that they never made it out. I don't. I personally believe that they did. Because I don't really like those movies where that's the twist at the end is like, ooh, but it's not over, and then you get a
Yeah.
sequel. Like,
Yeah.
woo,
It seems
like,
unnecessary. And it seems
yeah,
like kind of against the point of like moving on, right? And knowing that things are different, but they're still going to be okay. It wouldn't really hit the same if they're just like still there.
yeah, yeah. There's
And why would like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to the idea of like, well, maybe Luke, they're all having a shared hallucination, and that's why Trish and Lee are there.
mhm.
Like, or they're just friends now. Like,
Yeah,
maybe they just made it.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
point is that they can have a hope for the entire rest of their lives. And maybe they all go back to Hill House to die because that's how it works. Who knows? Who cares? That's
Who
50
cares?
years from now.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of it, is that, like, you can kind of, there's because you and I have talked about this before. I get so frustrated when authors and writers refuse to properly end their stories, and they say,
Mhm.
what do you think happened? How about actually you grow a pair of balls and finish
Yeah, like what if
yours?
that was your job?
Yeah, what a concept. I know.
What if you're the one who made the story? You
And
tell me.
this is directed at the um writer of the play Stuart Little. Specific. I know you're listening. I know you're out there. Listen, my third grade was ruined because of you. Finish the story. Does Stuart find the bird? It's so frustrating. I decided then and there, I'm like, I'm never gonna let a stupid story rest because I
Hmm.
deserve better. My teacher went on and on about praising it. She's like, "Isn't that so fun that you each get to make your own ending to the story?" And I was like, "I'm autistic. I need resolution."
Yeah, you're like, how dare you? You didn't do that to me.
No, I need
I
specific
feel
step-by-step
like,
instructions,
I
and
don't
I
know,
need.
like sometimes, right? Like sometimes a kind of open-ended or ambiguous ending to a story is fine. Like if it fits with the rest of the story. But like Stuart Little is a story for children. So maybe just give it an ending.
Yeah,
How hard is that? Yeah, that's annoying.
yeah, it drove me crazy. But so I like how this one has enough ambiguity to be interesting for the people who want it, but also
Hmm.
enough of a satisfying resolution to say I can let it rest, satisfied that that is the end. It's there. The possibility of um, a different ending is there if I think about it, but it doesn't have to be.
Right, right.
It's like the ending of Into the Spider-Verse. It
Hmm.
was enough that they could go on with the sequel and say we had enough, like they, because they planned it intentionally that way, which is a difference as well. Is Hill House is a complete story. It's a standalone narrative there, and
Hmm.
Into the Spider-Verse isn't. It was a setup for a lighter story, intentionally so. But also, it's the same concept, right? Of there's
Yeah,
enough
where
there
the
you
first
can
movie
say,
ends satisfyingly enough that you could watch it and be like, I just watched a great movie. But you also could like you can pick up on all those little things and then be really excited that the next ones are coming out.
yeah,
But either way,
yeah,
like it's a complete story in itself as well as opening up for future conversation. And not every story is doing that. Some stories are Stuart Little and they just need an ending.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So what more can we say?
one for Stuart Little, one for Jaws. You know which one.
Yeah. Um, I had just one or two things that I wanted to say that are just specifically about like kind of small details of it. One of them, I think I have like a picture. Well, I told you we talked about one of them yesterday, which is Steve saying, "Dad, what did I see?" Like because he doesn't know, like he can't figure it out. So that's crazy.
He finally asked his dad a question that he
Yeah. Because the thing is that Hugh has the answer, even like from when he's a kid. Steve thinks that he just saw like a guy working, and then
yeah,
years later he finds out that guy wasn't there, right? And Hugh has known the whole time what Steve actually saw, and Steve has it completely like he doesn't know. He thinks he knows, but he doesn't actually know.
he never
So
brought
it's
it up.
just so interesting that to say, "Dad, what did I see?" and finally just give up and say like, "You were right. Fine, you were right." Like now I need to be better informed. What did I see?
Yeah.
Um, and the other one I can send it to you if you want. It's just a little clip, but it's in Screaming Mimes that we were talking about earlier.
Screaming Mimes. First of all, what a name for an episode. That's insane. Love that.
When um the moment when Hazel says she lies and Liv says what and turns around and walks into the room and Hazel's like she lies. You don't have to listen to that. The
Yeah.
lighting in that because there's like the moonlight coming in through like the tree next to the window so everything's kind of spotted
Yeah.
and it looks like two things. When they're burying the kitten and Liv is wearing the sun hat and she has the spots on her, but also it looks like the black mold growing in the red room.
Ah,
Whoa!
connections!
Like anytime you see like if you see Liv with any like kind of spots of light and dark on her face, it always could be either of those things. And you know what? She looks great either time.
It's impossible for her to not look good. She's
Yeah,
got her
she's like,
smashed open.
yeah, genuinely just has one of the most like gorgeous faces in the world. Whatever.
There's nothing you can do.
You just have to accept it. She really looks like that. That's her face.
She has gone through life looking like that. You know what? She got
Mhm.
to make out with Antonio Banderas and Spy Kids. Not many people can get away with that and come out looking the better half of the couple. But
True. Yeah. I think
Marlo's
she's just
power.
destined though to be the nicest looking person in the room.
That's true. Yeah.
And there are worse things to happen.
Maybe you kill a kid, but you know what? You're gonna look fabulous doing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, real quick too. The one final thing is the labyrinthine nature of the house itself. How the like not understanding the layout of the house leads to it's easier for everybody to have a separate room within the narrative, and how that
Hmm.
is like amplified by each person having a different solitary space. When you're first
Mm-hmm.
watching through, it's like obviously this house is so confusing. It's so chaotic and there's no good blueprints for it. It's a mess. It's all over the place. And everyone has these individual rooms. Luke has his treehouse outside, Steve has the game room, and Nellie has a toy room, and Shirley has a family room, and Liv has a reading room. Everybody has a separate room, and it's like, yeah, how could anybody find their way around this house? It's such a disaster. And that makes so much sense later once you realize that's the same room over and over again. But you don't question it in while you're watching it, because again, it feels like a dream. It feels like it doesn't make sense until you think about it a little too hard, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
there aren't enough rooms in the house.
And
Like,
it's already being told by an unreliable narrator.
yeah, some things can't be told. Unreliable narrator issue.
Yeah, it's so interesting. But you get little like hints of it. Like I love when Steve finds the like vanity
Mm-hmm.
and he
Yeah,
talks to Mrs. Dudley about fixing it up and she's like, "Where did you find this?" And he's like, "In the game room, of course." And she's like, what, huh? Hmm?
game room. And he said, "So do you think I can fix it?" And she's like, "Oh well, we'll move on." She does the same thing with Nellie when she finds her cup of stars, because
Mm-hmm.
they go immediately from, "Wait, where'd you find this?" And she's like, "The toy room. I shouldn't
Right.
play with fragile things." And Mrs. Dudley's like, "Insist on your cup of stars."
Yeah, she's crazy.
She goes so fast.
She's so scary.
She
Um,
is. Or like
yeah,
when
but it's
Luke
so
is
interesting
like,
those little
"Which one's
hints.
her reading room?"
Mm-hmm. I'll be in my reading room if you need me. And they're like, huh?
And Shirley says, "Leave her alone. She's under a lot of stress lately." And you
Mm-hmm.
think Shirley knows she doesn't have a reading room, but
Yeah.
she says that she's
But
having a
Shirley's not gonna say Luke is
she must be
6.
confused. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, crazy.
I said that Hugh was the only one who knew exactly what the house was when he like accepted it. Liv had been manipulated into it. Nellie didn't know any better either. He was the only one who knew that the house was dangerous, what exactly dying there would entail, but he accepted it eyes wide open, and that was very good of him. Mm-hmm.
For the thing with the treehouse where he was like, I didn't build you a treehouse. We were there for the summer. Like, why would Luke have a treehouse? And Steve's like, but he had a treehouse. I went there. And he's like, interesting, Steve. You're in the most danger of anybody here. Ah!
Ooh, killing. And it makes so much sense too when they don't believe Luke when he says he was in a room in the basement. They say, "You must have
Mm-hmm.
seen a crawl space," because he doesn't have a treehouse. Nellie doesn't have a toy room.
Mm-hmm. And
Obviously,
and that's why they think that Abigail doesn't exist, right? They're like, oh, he just has a wild imagination. He'll go out and he'll be in his treehouse with Abigail.
yeah,
Those things are real.
he's seeing them.
Abigail's a real little girl.
You should have said, when you heard that it wasn't a crawl space and you like got to go down there and there's bottles and ledgers, you should have said, maybe we should reconsider the other things he's seeing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they also are not fake.
Maybe when Theo walked in and immediately said, "It's really cold in here and it smells funny. I'm uncomfortable." Huh. Maybe that was like weird because it was the middle of the summer.
And no one
So it
else.
should have been kind of warm in there. I don't know. How interesting.
um I would like to eventually, in the years coming, dig more into the five senses thing.
Hmm.
I love
Yeah, I
that.
think it's worth a rewatch because it doesn't fit like as maybe it's just not as obvious because if you're watching it with the mindset of like denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance, then you go into it and
Again,
it can become really clear. And I do think that it's like I don't think it's completely baseless. Like I can understand these people kind of representing that.
yeah.
But yeah, with the senses, I feel like it's less obvious, but you could make the argument. So I
And
think
oh,
we
baby, I
probably got to
love
watch it
making
again.
arguments.
Hmm. It's our favoriteest hobby.
Yes, I remember. And I'm actually still distinctly annoyed by this. I wrote a paper in my junior English class arguing
Hmm.
that a woman, oh, and I don't even remember. It was like a short story. It wasn't the yellow wallpaper, but it was
Okay.
like that vibe of repressed housewife kind of deal.
Okay. Yep.
And I wrote
Hmm.
a paper arguing that it was repressed like homosexuality that was like
Mm.
making her angry and kind of crazy and all these things. And they, my paper gave me a poor grade on it because she said I didn't have enough evidence. And I remember getting so annoyed. Even still, I'm like, I had
Hmm.
enough evidence. You just didn't agree with my conclusion. I
Yeah.
read, and I should see if I can find that paper. I don't think I'd be able
Plus,
to.
if she's repressed, how much evidence are you gonna have?
It's not going to be overt. That's the fun of it. I get to make arguments. I get
Hmm.
to propose a thesis. I have to then like support my own argument, which I did. It's never like you're never the author's never going to say the curtains are blue because you have to like
Hmm.
figure it out. And
You have
sometimes
to figure
it's
it
not even
out.
going to be something that the author themselves is aware of. But that doesn't mean that there isn't still evidence for it hidden in the text. Sometimes
Right.
it might not even be anything that the author had to do with at all, but it's your reading of the story. Like, you know,
Right. It's
there's
like how
always something.
everybody's annotation of Hamlet is their own journal, you know?
Even year to year.
Hmm.
And that's what makes it so much fun. Those are my favorite like fake arguments to get into my head when someone like maybe this is weird to say out loud. But when someone's like there's nothing more to that and I get to be like well actually
Well, what if there was? Huh? What then?
have you considered a motif? And they're
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, maybe the curtains are just blue because that's a nice color, and maybe there's a deeper meaning to it. Either way, how fun that you get to think about that and you get to decide why you think the curtains are blue.
like
Hmm,
it's a puzzle.
interesting. Yay!
Well, I think that's all I had to say about The Haunting of Hill House part 2. At least for the
Me
moment.
too. At least right now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a phenomenal show. I know we've talked like about every conceivable plot point, but if you've
Basically.
somehow made it
Hmm.
to this point and not like been convinced to watch the show, please watch the show. It's so good. You won't regret it.
Please, please, please. Know that for the first half of it, you'll be so scared. And for the second half of it, you will be so emotionally distraught. And if you know that going in, you'll be fine and you'll have a great time.
Yeah, that's so true. Cool. Well,
Cool. Good to talk to you.
yeah, you too.
Why do I feel like it's been so long when it's literally been a week?
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. I'm like, I finally get to talk to Olivia again today.
I'm like,
Stay
oh, it's been a
then.
year. It's been 6 days.
How have you been?
Fine.
Movies, movies, movies.
It's such a great joy in life to be able to watch movies.
Isn't it fantastic? It's my
Why
favorite.
aren't more people talking about this? You guys
Have
ever
you
seen
heard
a
this
movie?
movies?
This might be a hot take, but have you ever heard of motion pictures? Honestly, I think they're going to be the next big thing.
Sweeping the nation.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, bye.
Bye.